Hi, I'm Barbara O'Brien. I'm an animal trainer and photographer, and I'd like to welcome you to The Empathetic Trainer. Hi, this is Barbara O'Brien, and you're listening to the Empathetic Trainer podcast. Got a real special guest today. Shelley Appleton is going to talk to us all about horses and our relationship with them. And you know that's like one of my favorite things, and I'm sure one of your favorite things to learn about too. Dr. Shelley Appleton is a highly skilled equine trainer and coach. She owns and operates calm, willing, confident horses. Shelley believes that the key to any successful relationship is to help support the horse by making them feel calm, confident, and comfortable. She is also the author of 2 books, Confidence and Trust, Solving the Human and Horse Equation, and Buying and Supporting a New Horse, The Essential Guide. Just even the title of your book is fascinating. Thank you for coming, Shelley. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be on here. Thanks for inviting me, Barbara.
Great. The buying the new horse, making them feel calm, confident, comfortable. Wow, I really relate to that. And so I do want to definitely dig into that and learn about that book. But a few things we'll start out with before we get to that is I'm just curious how you became what you kind of consider, which I love, the accidental horse trainer. How did you
Oh,
become
yes.
an accidental horse trainer?
I'm a total accident. So, yeah, if you told me even 15 years ago that I'd be sitting here doing this as a full-time job, I would have thought that was hilarious. So I was your quintessential equestrian. I was an academic in pharmacy. I had a 25-year career in academia as a pharmacist, and I was someone that rode horses as a hobby. And I was one of those people that was very dedicated to my sport of dressage. And I had my weekly lessons and I had my horses. And, I was the quintessential amateur. And then I had some epiphanies, let's call them that, some moments in my life that really confronted me and highlighted the ignorant world that I was living in, and realized that I actually didn't have a clue what I was doing, which was very confronting when you've ridden horses since you were 10.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what happens. That's why I'm accidental. I had no intention ever, even when I started getting good at training horses, it was purely a personal pursuit. I had got curious from my mistakes, and I'll tell you about I'll run through the terrible discoveries I've discovered about myself and what I was doing to my horses. But what happened is that it sparked my curiosity when those mistakes were revealed to me. It sparked my curiosity. And that really filled me with a real passion, that there was a lot that I didn't know. And one thing that I had been able to do really well in my life was to learn things really well. In fact, that was my coping mechanism for anything that scared me, was to just master it. So I got very passionate about it, but it was a purely personal endeavor. And it wasn't until I helped one of my friends because I witnessed something terrible, and I'll run through all that for you, that really kind of catapulted me into helping people. But it started off just as my friends, and then their friends, and then their neighbors, and then it got bigger than Ben-Hur. And I'll never forget the first person that contacted me and asked me to do a clinic was, and I'm in Australia, you've got to understand, and at the time I was in Perth, Western Australia, which is the most remote city in the world. The first person that contacted me and asked me to do a clinic was from Texas in America. And that was so hilarious. Anyway, so that's where I came from. And let me just tell you, I want to tell you what happened. What was the moment that happened that really started me off, or really opened my eyes to my ignorance, like my big mistake. So after
I want to stop you right there because
yes,
we all relate to what you're saying. Anyone
yeah,
who's been around animals and works with animals, we could all, especially the older you get, the more you go,
yeah,
I can't believe I used to think this way. I used to
yeah,
be this way. And you kind of beat yourself up. But, so I understand already a little
yeah,
bit. And it helps us to go like, we're not alone in
yeah.
this. So please
Oh,
go on. I just wanted to
yeah.
say that like I get it. You're not the only one.
No, it's just that I think people always thank me for telling this story. So I want to tell it because it's like, thank you, like that was kind of inspiring. It's like, yes, my biggest failure of my equestrian life is an inspiration. So that's good. So let me tell it to you. So my horse died sadly when I was in my final years of high school, and I decided just to focus on my studies instead of jumping in and getting a new horse. So what I did is I didn't get another horse, although I leased horses and rode other people's horses, until I had finished my university degree and I had done my internship, and I'd actually worked for a couple of years to save up because I wanted to buy the most amazing horse ever. So I went and purchased the flashiest young warm blood I could find, okay, to be an absolute dressage star. And then he proceeded to scare the hell out of me for nearly 8 years. 8 years he scared the hell out of me. And I labeled him as sensitive because he was scared of the world. I'd fall off him, and I'm not kidding. I would fall off him every 4 to 6 weeks because when he would spook, he would also spin. But I actually never got hurt because he was so athletic. He spun so close and low to the ground, and I always fell off to the offside, off to the right. And I was only ever quite a low distance from the ground, but it was always just like bang, and I was on the ground. And it was like the ultimate of human sufferings. You know, they say the 3 human sufferings are pain, uncertainty, and the need for constant work. Well, Scooter, and that was the horse's name, was all that rolled into one. And so riding him was just a dread. You just waited for it because you never knew what it was. It was at something or nothing. You could never predict it. So I labeled him as sensitive. And of course, being a pharmacist from that world I lived in, Barbara, what do you think I did? What do you think I did to try to fix him? What do you guess?
So medication or something?
That's right, because he had a medical condition, didn't he? There's obviously something wrong with him, and I had to cure that like with, you know, how medicine cure things. It's like, what's the deficient thing? What's going wrong? And how do I fix it? So that was my preoccupation for a long time. And of course, I'm a really hard worker. I already told you that, you know, I hard work my way out of problems. Yet this horse, it didn't matter what pill, potion, herb, supplement I gave him, like nothing really ever changed it. And then it was like I got a new saddle, I got new bits. I even did an entire Bowen therapy course, which is like a massage type modality, because he had one once and he was good the next day. So it's just like, damn it, I'm doing that whole diploma. So I even did that. It was complete desperateness. And it even got a little bit crazy towards the end because I was getting him to, and I'm not going to say it's crazy because, you know, there is some research into aromatherapy, but before I'd ride him, I'd get him to smell patchouli and lavender oil. Before I rode him. So it was just like, so I went from like, you know, a pharmacist into desperateness into complementary medicine to try to find the solution for my sensitive horse. And I just looked at him. I was just sensitive, and how I saw myself was very unfortunate that I'd bought this sensitive horse with this really difficult temperament. And the only thing that I saw myself as being deficit in was bravery. That was it, bravery. I just had to be braver to ride him. Anyway, then my lovely farrier at the time, he became my partner and mentor. His name was Gary Willoway. He's an exceptional horseman. He was a great mentor because he never told you what you were doing wrong, ever. He waited for you to ask. And he offered to ride Scooter for me one day. Anyway, imagine this. Imagine the most beautiful day, right? Beautiful sunny day, not too hot, gentle breeze, walking down to my arena. And I was quite sure that that Gary was going to get hurt because, you know, he was a rodeo man. He did team roping and he rode those really quiet quarter horses, you know, those really quiet quarter horses, because that's how in the silo I was in my world of dressage. And I was quite sure he'd never ridden anything like this high octane dressage horse that I had. And I'm walking down there and I'm telling him all the things that Scooter spooked at in my arena. Because you see, Barbara, I could only ride at one end of my arena on probably, I wouldn't even call it a 20-meter circle. I'd call it a 15-meter circle because he was so scared of everything. I used to call that my circle of safety. So I could only ride him on this circle. That's how restricted my life was with him and where I could ride him. I never was able to go to a competition. I would go to my coach's place where I'd fall off a few times. And once or twice I tried to take him to riding club, which was a traumatizing experience. Anyway, so got the circle of safety, and I'm running through with Gary all the things that Scooter spooks at, right? He's worried about this, worried about that. Anyway, Gary gets on him and asks him to walk off. And of course, on cue, Scooter spooked, right? And all Gary did was give him a bit of a kick and put him up into a canter. Now, I was a bit validated to begin with by that spook, because as we were walking down and I was telling him about everywhere that he spooked, Gary looked a bit quizzical. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was looking slightly amused. And I asked him, didn't you want to know what Scooter spooked at? Because to me, that was sensible. That was risk management, right? That's how my mind worked. And he was like, oh, no, I'll just wait for him to do something. I'm not going to preempt it. Anyway, I thought that was madness. So when he spooked on him in the first 2 seconds, I felt very validated. But then that's where it ended, Barbara. It ended. And I proceeded to watch Scooter and Gary lope around my arena past everything scary, with Scooter just relaxed, looking like anyone could ride him, the most relaxed horse in the world. Gary turned around. He went the other way, loping, no problem, beautiful, relaxed. And I had that horrid realization, very confronting realization, that his problem was actually me. And sometimes you can be so clever and so hardworking that you don't see your own fault in a situation. And I remember he loped up to me and he halted, and Gary just smiled and put the reins on Scooter's neck. And I looked at Gary and I said, it's me, isn't it? And he went, yeah, it's you. And I just went, because Gary doesn't offer any, he had to ask, right? He was very polite, let you work out your own problems. And I said, what am I doing wrong? And he said, it's you. You're telling him the world is terrifying and he's believing you. Stop creeping around him. Stop worrying about the world. Stop trying to protect him, because he believes you that the world is terrifying. Stop it. And you know what? That's all I had to do. That is all I had to do on that horse. That was the easiest horse ever to transform. But it gave me this lesson. And although I tell you what, it was one hard pill to swallow, when that, you think you're good at something and suddenly you realize you've caused this.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, it was this, whoa, it was like, that's all I have to do is change me. That was also super empowering. So although it was super uncomfortable, it was like, seriously, I had changed myself and learnt some hard stuff in my day. This got revealed to me. Yes, it was very true. It was very confronting, but boy, I know how to change me. And I'll never forget the day. I'm going to tell you this other horrible story, this other horrible thing I did to Scooter as well, just to tell you. It was lightly sprinkling one day. Imagine it was lightly sprinkling. It was coming on winter. And I was leading him through a gate. This is before my epiphany. Leading him through a gate, and he kept bolting through the gate, right, nearly over the top of me. Anyway, I got angry, because that's what you do when you're scared. When you're scared and you need something done, you channel the opposite emotion, which is like anger and aggression. And I was making him go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth across this threshold of this gate, until he did it kind of quietly, right? And I remember him, he was only 16 hands, but at this time, by the time I got him through the gate quietly, he was 18 hands, and he was solid as a statue, and he was just staring off into the distance. And I remember looking at him and wondering, what the hell is going through your head, horse? Yeah. I can't work you out, right? And then I heard the tick, tick, tick of the electric fence shorting out. Scooter had metal shoes on. Oh. He was actually being electrocuted every time he went through that gate. Yet I made him do that multiple times until he walked through it, right? Wow. So think of that.
You must have felt terrible, but I mean, it wasn't on purpose.
Well, I did. But I felt terrible about that. But I also just remember looking at him and just feeling completely and utterly hopeless and frustrated about how I get in your head. Anyway, what Gary did was release that I didn't have to worry about his head. I had to worry about my own. what I
Yeah.
was doing. That's
Yeah.
far easier to fix. Far easier to fix. So that was my lesson. He was my lesson in the self awareness and that thing that I had never considered that I could impact a horse like that. And that was
Yeah.
straight. It was complete and absolute ignorance. And I tried to think, what was I thinking back then? And it was just like, that's how simple and limited my thoughts are of the situation of what was going on between my horse. I had no, no perception, no idea at all that I had any impact on a horse, and they should
Well,
just
you're
be
you're
quiet.
younger than me. I believe you're younger than me, Shelley, but, certainly when I was growing up, none of this was considered. I mean, how a horse feels, except for a few exceptional people that we kind of learn from now, even now, and but certainly, oh, he's not listening, hit him harder. He's
Mm,
have him respect you. That it's just, and the same thing happened in the dog world. They were very harsh on dogs back in the
yeah,
day. Now the
yeah.
dog people have caught up. It's getting much, much better. Horse people are just now starting to wake up, that the horse can actually think and feel, but also, um, yeah, I remember someone said to a mare I was riding, she might like a French link bit, she might have a thicker palate. She's a Morgan, and I was like,
Oh
thank
yeah.
goodness I went like, oh, that's great. I'll give it a try. And of course the horse was happier, but just being aware of like what she was thinking and feeling, you're like 20 years old and you know everything,
Oh
So,
yeah. It was just like
and
there's just vacantness. Like I could it was not in my like how you can only your reality is constructed by what you know. And my
mhm.
knowing and my beliefs was so small, so limited that was my reality that I couldn't. It seems so common sense now when you think about
Right.
it. And in fact, I have to tell you this, Barry, because my PhD is in human learning and the development of expertise. And there's this really fascinating thing, and this to any professional out there, I want you to tell you this little bit of a insight into human learning.
Mhm.
Humans have to learn things in small increments, right? They have to learn this concept before they can take on this next concept. They can't go straight to that other concept. They've got to learn things in layers. And
Mhm.
there's a theory, and it's the greatest learning theory that helps you have a lot of patience for humans. If you want to be patient with animals, you've got to be super patient with humans because we're complicated. So
Mhm.
there's a theory called threshold learning, right?
Right.
Thresholds
Right.
of learning.
Mhm.
And we have to pass through these thresholds of light bulb moments to be able to see one layer before the next layer can be illuminated and we can see the next layer. Right? That's how we learn.
Right.
That's why humans do are useless. We can sit down and we can tell them the whole thing in a lecture. We can explain it all out, and they'll walk away and may learn a little bit. It's because your brain has to get concept by concept and only gets added on bit by bit in these layers. But there's this really fascinating thing I've got to tell you that when we pass a threshold, this really
Mhm.
peculiar thing happens to us. We completely forget we didn't know it before and that it
Ah,
was hard for us to understand. So that makes us completely impatient with everyone who hasn't got it yet because we forget that. And that's the thing I
well,
tell people when you get it, just because you can see it. It's that whole theory of mind and our kind of propensity. We tend to think we could mind read people that what I see, you can see. We learn things in layers. It's hard for us. We need those light bulb moments or those threshold moments of being able to pass through over a threshold of understanding something. And then we forget it
mhm.
was difficult to know in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's really, really true. For example, I have 4 sons. They're grown up now, but growing up, teaching them to tie their shoes, and it'd be, like, so obvious to us. "No, just watch me. You can learn to tie this shoe, right?" But think of how hard that is for a 5-year-old, because first of
Yeah.
all, he's gotta learn to manipulate the string, and then he's gotta learn to cross the string, and then he's gotta remember to,
Yes.
whatever
Yep.
way you do it, 2 bunny ears or 1 bunny ear, whatever the theory.
Yeah.
Having that patience, because by the time
Mm.
you get that 4th kid, you're like, "I'm getting you Velcro shoes. I don't care. You can wear them the rest of your life," because you're
Yeah.
just having patience for someone else's learning
Yeah.
journey.
Yep.
That's
And
a really great thing that you're
yeah.
saying that you're
And
talking.
And because we told someone, we just assume that they know it. It's just like, no, they
Right.
need
Yeah.
a lot of repetition. They need to actually experience themselves. Humans are like that. Our superpower is our we're completely adaptable, creative creatures. And if we didn't kind of how our brains work, and in fact, that's what gets us in trouble with horses, is how our minds work and how much we think of things. We think horses think like us, and they don't. We're
I
so
don't.
full of these thoughts and these kind of urges and emotions of things because we're programmed to like we've evolved to like adapt, so we can never be happy because we've got this with this instinct to keep changing, building, changing, worrying about things, wanting to fix that problem. So yeah,
Wow.
I hope that makes people a little bit more patient with humans. But I love reflecting on my own naivety and ignorance, even though it mortifies me when I think. And I suppose that's what's giving me purpose behind what I do, and probably makes me a little bit different in the equestrian world, is my understanding of the human creature, the
Mhm.
human side of it, and having that fascination about how humans learn about horses. And like people like hearing my story because like mine is so bad. mine, is, mine is
Well,
really bad.
we all have our stories, no doubt about
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I have a mare that I've had almost 2 years now, maybe three, see, 2, 3. Anyway, they're from the wilds of Montana. They're not Mustangs, they're Morgans, but
yeah,
they're out in giant pastures and not handled a lot. And she came as a 3-year-old and worried about everything here. And she left a herd of 70 horses down to a herd of four
yeah.
or five.
Wow.
So then now they have 24/7 freedom. I mean, they're not stalled or anything like that. But she was worried. There's not enough
Mm,
horses here to protect us. And I was afraid of her because she was defensive with her hind end, and I was so worried she was going
yeah,
to always kick me. And then I just made up this whole story about what she's thinking and what she's doing
yeah,
because I was afraid. And then like every time I work with her, I'm afraid, and then she's like, "What are we afraid of?" Because she feels
yeah,
that. And my trainer, who Tiffany Stoffer, who I've had on my podcast, actually, I'm really blessed she lives nearby, comes out to help me, and the horse is transformed with her. The horse is like,
yeah.
"I got no anxiety, I'm fine, nothing's bothering me." And then it's that realization, oh,
It's
it's
me.
me. I'm just projecting any scary experience I ever had getting hurt with a horse on this
Yeah,
horse who's never hurt me. Okay, she's never done a thing.
yeah,
And then she got over her worry with time. She got over her
yeah,
worry about like the new environment because I gave her a lot of time with no pressure
yeah,
to be there. So and now it's like, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm going to have common sense, but I can read your body language. I can read
yeah,
what you're doing. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Now, when she gets around my trainer, she's even better because
yeah,
Tiffany has no agenda and just, like understands her. She feels like, oh, it's you. Thank goodness. This other person, silly. But I love watching that. I'm aware of it now. And she's the only one of my 7 horses that I even like was afraid of. And it's
yeah,
like, why did I project all this human gunk onto this horse who's really quite simple? She's
yeah.
just really quite simple. So I
Well,
get
that
it. We've
was
all that.
sorry. That's just being human as well. That you didn't trust her. That's the
No,
thing. You didn't trust
yeah.
her, and you had to build. So what you've been
Well, if
able
you've
to
been
do over
hurt, especially
time
when
is
you get
seeing her
hurt,
work
you
with a
never ever get
trainer.
hurt when you're young, and then you get older and you get
You've
hurt,
been able,
and you like get really anxious about riding again. And you're like,
yeah,
because I broke my pelvis on a horse couple years
yeah,
ago now. And I recovered. I'm fine, right? But I had that anxiety inside of me, like I can't afford to get hurt again. That was really bad getting hurt. And
yeah. No,
now
that's a
the one
well.
the one that I was afraid of
Okay.
is not trained yet. She's 5 or coming 5. So no, she's 5. So Tiffany's going to be helping me, and we're going to start her really, really slow. And Tiffany's going to ride her first.
Yeah. No, that's really
I don't
wise.
want to
That's being
project. I
really
don't want to
sensible.
project that fear. Yeah, but I just bought a horse a couple months ago, a month or 2 ago. I gave her plenty of time to settle in. Another Morgan. I have all Morgans, and
Yeah.
she's 100% like, I'm with you, fellas. I mean, just so giving, so sweet. And I ride her, and I'm like, I feel absolutely wonderful riding you. Like she's giving me back my safety, my confidence, my everything that I needed. So I will feel better about the one that's more scary, right? And it's all human. These horses are just
Yeah.
being horses. So
Yeah.
I really resonated, and that's why I wanted to talk to you and have you as our guest, because I was resonating with what you were saying, and your story rings true. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So if we were afraid, So one of my questions for you is, how do we build confidence in us then to project on our horses? How do we build that confidence? What's your advice for that?
Oh, well, the thing is, you've got to understand about confidence, and what's actually making you feel vulnerable with a horse is very multifaceted. There's a number of factors, and that's why it's just not one thing. And that's why someone will get benefit from something and someone will try to do the same thing. Like, just say getting riding lessons. People say, well, go get some riding lessons. And,
Mm-hmm.
that might work for someone, but it doesn't work for somebody else. And it's because you've got to understand what triggers that sensation of vulnerability within you. So it can be, I kind of break it down, and how I like to explain people is from like an equation, that confidence equals your sense of competence, okay, with the horse, multiplied by trust, which is your sense of reliability in the horse, multiplied by time. Now, what time means, time's important because time and repetition make something familiar. And that is very important to get, is a sense of familiarity with a horse, and
Mm.
familiarity that you're able to competently handle that horse doing that thing or that situation, and familiar with how reliable your horse is, right? However, there's things that interfere with that being able to grow that sense of competence inside you, as well as a sense of reliability inside you. There's things that can interfere with that. That's what needs to be understood. The first thing is, a common one can be a fear phobia. You can get fear. So if you have had an accident, your
Mm-hmm.
mind's going to grab onto that this is a dangerous thing. So your subconscious self is going to want to protect you. And that's what the sensation of fear and discomfort is, because it's your subconscious self trying to keep you alive. And it's saying to you, step away from the dangerous thing. And people can, what their brain latches onto as being unsafe is very fascinating. Sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
can be just the mounting a horse. Sometimes it might be cantering a horse. Sometimes it might be riding in a certain area. Or, as one of my clients, most fascinating case I ever had, was a lady who she'd had an accident, and she'd actually fallen off and she'd gone unconscious. So she doesn't remember the accident at all. So
Mm-hmm.
she felt
Okay.
nothing about getting back on. That was fine until she had to turn right.
Mm.
And the horse going right and the sensation of the horse going right through her body made her panic. So that's
Huh.
what her brain had actually latched onto as being the dangerous thing. So you have to navigate that. And what you've got to do, you've got to show that part of your brain that you are safe. That you are safe. It's got to have that familiarity, has to click in, and you've got to repeat things. And I just get people just to keep repeating, and really acknowledging that feeling inside them that's being generated, because your brain will down regulate something if it's got evidence that you're okay. So it's finding what that is and consciously targeting it, so that you can, so that your brain can identify that this is a safe activity. It's no longer dangerous. But then
Oh.
there can be other things that are really interesting. There are things that can interfere with your sense of competence and getting reliability. And these are like which I call, inside us, we get hidden false beliefs about ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not safe enough. I'm not likable enough. There's all these things that really hit at your ideas of self-efficacy about yourself, about being able to do things, and they're like your like your childhood wounds, or things you've
Mhm.
accidentally learnt in life. Things like, which can be quite destructive, is it's not uncommon for this thing, this feeling of responsibility that you have for the emotions of others, which leads to people pleasing behavior. People pleasing is quite an insidious thing that a lot of women can have. Thinking
Mhm.
if we behave in a certain way, don't upset anything, we'll be liked, there will be no danger. And what happens, because this gets triggered inside us, we start people pleasing the horse
Ah.
in our
Okay.
human way, you see. And that doesn't help any horse, because that whole thing of wanting back off, keep the horse happy, does not actually keep the horse happy, because it gives the horse nothing to follow or understand what it's doing. So of course it feels uncomfortable about a human that's shrinking all the time from them, and not being clear. So that can sabotage things.
Yeah. No, that
um,
makes perfect sense.
yeah. Now, there's some other big ones. Look, there's quite a few of them, but there's other things that trigger sense of vulnerability in your body. Now, this can be illness, injury, because you don't feel that sense of balance on a horse. And this is a big one for us women. It's only something that I actually realized in the last couple of years because of my age myself and the people around me and the age they're going through, is perimenopause.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it does on many levels, because it changes the sensation, because you see, we get triggered not just what's coming on the outside, but what's happening to us on the inside. And what happens when our hormones change is it actually changes around, or you actually can lose muscle. Mm-hmm. So your sense of balance and your sense of how gravity affects you and everything completely changes. And so your sense of balance on a horse completely alters.
I had not thought of that. Interesting.
Oh, it's massive. It is massive. And I go look at all my clients. When did you lose your confidence? When did you start having problems? When did you have your accident? It's all around the same time. And it made me tie these together. Now I need someone to do some proper research on it. But, as being someone at the coalface, a practitioner in this area, any research out there, I see that there is a correlation. It just needs to be, of course, investigated. But there's a lot that goes on in a woman's body during the changes, fluctuation of hormones that goes on a physiological level, plus also psychological level, plus also everything's getting out of whack, which is setting off your nervous system in terms of things, because it's all completely changing from the familiar. And the familiar is your comfort zone. And when your hormone profile changes, your entire body gets out of whack. And this then changes the way that your body responds to balance on the horse or things like that. You can have overreactions or just your heart rate going up abnormally. It all triggers you, and it all gets interpreted by your brain as fear, right? Or fear or discomfort like that. So, yeah, going into perimenopause and menopause is massive. And that and your horse riding and how you feel about your horse and your confidence levels around the horse are also one of the casualties for that. And again, like everything else to do with menopause, because we don't talk about it enough, is that it get something that gets as gets hampered along the way because of that.
That's fascinating. So my question then is, so someone who's older, gone through it, do you adapt? I would hope that you would adapt.
Yes. Well, see, this is the thing. It's like, this is what you got to understand. You learn to be confident and trust a horse. You learn it because you actually learn to not trust them and not be confident, that you can reverse it. That's why I see it as an equation. You've got to target it. So as soon as you know, so what it is, and with that, my book, that I've actually got a copy of it here because I was just making an audio book of it at the moment. Yeah, that's great. My book. Yeah. And it's only a little book. Can you see that? I deliberately made it little because I want someone to sit down and read it in one hit. And can I tell you, it was very hard getting it that concise to try to hit at the main points. But we'll
definitely have links to the book and stuff. We'll have it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And I will actually be, I've got another edition that will be coming out as well because of more alert. Like, this doesn't have in there the stuff about menopause. Menopause yet. I just title it under aging, of what happens when you age and kind of thing. But menopause puts that on steroids. So what you've got to do is you've got to understand all the factors which are impacting your sense of competence with the horse. All of them. What are they? Right? Or your sense of reliability with the horse. So I believe in, increasing your skills. You've got to target your own health. Just say with me, I'm very conscious. I do a lot of strength training, all the things that have actually documented evidence of helping with menopause symptoms. Okay. Sure. Strength training is a massive one. Okay. Looking at your diet, Pilates, yoga is powerful things, lifting some weights, powerful things, all that you've got to change what you've done previously. Upskill yourself. I recommend everyone. So what I focus on when I help people is I take them and their horse through what I call rebooting, which is just basically retrain their foundation.
Okay.
When I hand people those skills, right? To be able to do that, that's empowering. There's a principle called the Pareto principle, and it says that there's about 20% of the overall skill set of a particular job you use 80% of the time. Well, the skills that you use to put a foundation of a horse and start a horse is that
Hmm.
80%. When I
Yeah.
hand them that, and I hand them the feeling of being able to influence, I don't like the word control or even training can be looked down upon. We're always influencing our horses and our animals, even
Yes.
beyond when it's not training, because people just look at training and they look at positive or negative reinforcement and all these type of things. No, we are, in everything we do with our animals, we are influencing them. And
Sure.
so when I give key tools to be able to modify behavior, it gives them that greater sense of influence. So that feeds into that. So I always recommend that. So there's things that you've got to, so basically there's things that you can target towards the horse, like your horse skills,
Hmm.
and there's also non-horse things you can do. So a lot of people get benefit from hypnotherapy or I did a great I got a podcast myself called Canter Therapy,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I did a podcast with a psychologist that actually practices EMDR therapy,
Hmm.
which is a
Right.
type of trauma therapy.
Yes.
And I personally had a lot of benefit from that. So it's really what it is, Barbara. It's all about care of yourself. It's care of yourself. It's physical and mental and emotional care of yourself is like your foundation to
Hmm.
then build on top your skills to be able to influence the horse and your understanding of the horse, things that I was saying I was lacking before with the scooter, not having any idea that this will transform your confidence and trust with a horse. And like
Oh,
I am
absolutely.
total living proof of that because by severe accident, that's really I've done that to on a bigger scale. And I've gone from your quintessential amateur to a professional. And I
Hmm.
help people all around the world. And so that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So if I can do it, like seriously, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Right. It's attainable. Um,
Absolutely.
this is really profound. I had no idea of the connection. I look about and reflect back and the
Yeah.
time in my life, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Hmm.
get it. And also, it's interesting to me. I think the most frustrating time, at least my peers, when I read, other people's comments and things, they get a horse finally, they start riding because they finally have the money or the time, maybe they didn't,
Yeah.
and they get to a certain point and they want to get better, and then everything falls apart for them and they feel so much shame because
Yes.
like I'm not, my horse doesn't follow me around or whatever the latest guru
Yes.
or something makes them think is
Yes.
the way it's supposed to be. I
Yeah.
mean, of course, we're all going to be kind and build relationship. That's what this show is about with all animals, right?
Yes.
That's not what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It's just I don't know what it's like for men because I'm not inside men's heads at all. But I just know a lot of women, especially they get to a certain age, they learn a lot of things, like new information. We're gonna go da
Yeah.
da da, and then we get out there, and then we think we've messed up, and then we
Yeah.
feel shame, and then we're
Yes.
like, I don't want to try anymore, or I just,
Yeah.
and so by saying like, look, you can help yourself get through this, and that'll help your horse by understanding what's going on. That's gratifying. It's like, oh, good, there's hope. I'm not the only one that feels
Yeah.
this way. Here's how I can work on it. And that way, be
Yeah.
great to like visit your, if people are interested, we'll have all of Shelley's information available and how she can help. And do you come to America to do clinics? Can we get you here?
Most likely will, or most likely will. It's something that I've got. There's so much. I've built so many communities here in Australia. It's like when you're going to come to America or go to New Zealand
Mhm.
or go to Europe. And the thing is, like, when I find I've got to find a spot to put it in because it will mean one of my communities here will miss out. But I do plan on because I've made a lot of connections in the States.
Mhm.
And America is one place that I would love to visit.
Well, there's
I would
certainly
absolutely love to visit.
a need, and I believe reception. I think people are just becoming more and more wanting to have a better relationship with their horses, with their
Yeah.
dogs, with I think they're making a. It seems to me like making an effort. So
Yeah.
very. Man, we could talk to you for hours, but we've got some more things to cover.
That's
Um,
okay. Yeah.
I'm just, you're worth another podcast for sure because there's just I'm already like, wow,
Yeah, no,
Uh,
there's so many avenues you can go when you can look. And I said, this is what I'm so fortunate about. But also, Barbara, everyone can then feel good because you got to remember that I had this knowledge. So I had this, and the reason why I've been able to be accelerated in being able to my horse skills is because I had this massive background in learning.
mhm.
So when I worked out that horses just learnt as well, it was like, phew, that my silos, my world kind of collided. And that's why I was able to go so far. But you got to remember that me here wasn't expert in learning, but was not teaching my or training my horse because I didn't see it. Like that's how bad, that's how ignorant I was that I couldn't even apply my own knowledge until it
Well,
got thrown in my face.
yeah, I think we all have experiences like
Yeah.
that. I'm a much more better dog trainer, and I don't even train dogs. I just train animal actors for set, for like commercials and
Yeah.
videos. And I just train animals for set. I'm much more in tune with how the dog is feeling than I was 20 years ago. Not that I was
Yeah.
a terrible thing and I never mistreated them, but I'm much more. I keep learning and learning
Yeah.
and learning,
It's
and that's just
your
better for
That's your
go.
expertise that keeps getting laid on. That's because you're an expert. And when you're an expert, things that you see become very easy, and then your brain's got the capacity to see more and more and more. And that's what I was saying about those thresholds, is that someone has to start off seeing simple things. And I remember I used to just be able to see a behavior in a horse or a
Mhm.
dog. So I just a behavior, that's all I could see. And then I started seeing all the color around that behavior, and then you learn more about it. So you get to interpret it more. Yeah, you get to
Mhm.
interpret deeper and deeper. And then your expertise kicks in and it puts everything on kind of automatic pilot. So you can just see something and know it because it's going in through the faster cycle through your brain of being able to detect it. It's very
Yeah.
cool.
Well, just briefly, your book, Buying and Supporting the New Horse, The Essential Guide. Um, a lot of people, at least it seems to me, get a new horse and within a couple days, like we're going to get on him and ride him, and now, oh wait, he's not like he
Yeah.
was. Well, what
Yeah.
happened? You sold me a bad horse. Well, of course not. You just took him away from his whole
Yeah.
life and expected him to, be able to. And some horses are really stoic and they're going to hide what, kind of like just go, okay, that's my life. But other
Yeah.
horses are like, no, I need a little time, and they all deserve some time. So, what is your, just kind of briefly, because I think we should all go get the book. I'm going to get the book.
Well, I
Please,
got to be honest, Barbara, hold tight on that book because I'm just in the matter of because I said I've learnt more. I'm actually adding to it. In fact, I created another resource because back in July, God, I was going to say a couple of weeks ago. It was actually a few months ago. I wrote a blog that went viral because I was just getting frustrated by people just not getting it. And
mm-hmm.
because I come from a health background, sometimes my biggest articles that I write are things that I write in like 5 minutes. And I wrote this article in 5 minutes, and I called it New Home Syndrome. Right?
Yeah,
New
yeah.
Home
I think that's
Syndrome.
probably where I might have found you
You
that
might
way.
have even found me from it because it went totally viral. It still gets shared hundreds of times per day. It's really quite fascinating. But it got people's attention. And it's interesting because I've written about this before, but it was something about giving it like a medical sounding name that made everyone beeline for it. And that's interesting about people. But people don't understand, and it's a combination of not understanding the horse as a species and how they're wired,
Mm-hmm.
and not understanding stress and how stress compounds and how stress can become chronic, and stress can lead to other pathologies or physiological or psychological problems down the track. And so I coined this term New Home Syndrome, and it went off, and it was all about to understand that we take a horse that is wired to be a herd animal that works as a collective in the wild. That's how they've evolved. They're a herd
Mm-hmm.
animal. They work as a team. There's none of this dominant stuff. It's they work as a team, as their families. And I recommend everyone out there. The greatest thing, Barbara, I ever did was go and spend a week trekking in the bushlands here in Australia,
Yeah,
observing wild horses. It blew my mind. Do you know that
yeah.
made me feel like? Do you know what I felt? I felt like I had worked with someone for 40 years and had never bothered asking them where they lived, who their family members was and what they did on the weekend. I
Right.
treated this animal like a work colleague, and I knew about them, but not really about them. It was the most touching experience to see that horses, they live in families, and they are truly families, and they work together regardless whether they're a bachelor band or a family group of stallion mares and young horses. It was
Sure.
very touching, but that's how horses have evolved. Yet we go and pluck them out, isolate them, and do things to them that is completely and absolutely unnatural, and have no concept of the ramifications that has to that animal. And in fact, the
Right.
more you learn about the horse, the more I learn about them, the more I'll tell you that they are the most gentle animal on the planet. And that what we do to them is extreme, extreme. And we think we know them in that state, and we don't. And I say it's like this: it's like aliens come down to Earth. They go to a lunatic asylum. They walk around for a bit, look at the poor people that are in the lunatic asylum, and go back up to their planet and go, "Yeah, I checked out the humans. Yeah, I know all about them." And it's like, yeah, no, you can see the ones that are very affected by stress. That is not a good kind of way to think humans by looking at humans that are in an extreme situation.
Yeah.
So that's what I said. We don't. We think we know them. So we take these horses that are at a home where everything's familiar. They've been able to cope with this unnatural situation they've been wired for in their life because they've got familiar with it, how they're handled, what they eat, everything like that, who they've connected with. Because people think, even though a horse is isolated in the yard, that they're not connecting with the other horses. They are. They absolutely are. And we only know that when we take two horses to a show and they become stuck to each other like glue, and we get annoyed by that. But they're just horses being horses. Anyway,
Right.
we take that animal and we go completely change its environment. An animal that has been wired to live in one spot and to know that spot really, really well, so that any small change in that environment, they're onto, because is that a rock or is that a big cat?
Right.
That's what they're
Right.
wired for. Then we go and completely turn their world upside down and set their sensory system on fire as it tries to work out, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And try to navigate that. And that amount of stress, and that even if you just see the cognitive load on that sensory system to try to process all that, right? And then you got the other effect that their food or change, their diet and their guts, a horse's digestive system is the core. And it's one thing you've got to understand the impact on that, and their hind gut, and how that drastically affects everything from
Yeah.
there.
Sure.
And this horse is going through this absolute tumultuous experience, and we don't appreciate it. And we've got to manage them through that. And that's why, of course, so what happens is I worked out that besides, all the people that were coming towards me, I could correlate with like kind of the age of perimenopause, and that was that. I was correlating also the horses that people were having trouble with were horses that were really, they'd acquired them in recent times, and they hadn't been able to get on with the horse. And they all would tell a story of how the horse was misrepresented to them, or they didn't buy what they expected, etc. And the thing is that horse that they went and trialed, or they rode beforehand, when they rode it after the ghost of their owner was still on the horse, when the horse was in its own environment and could cope with your little differences, that when you take that horse out of there and you put it in chaos where it knows nothing, you're riding and you're dealing with the stressed version of that horse. That is not that horse. That is the stress. That's like someone judging you on the worst day of your life and saying, well, they're a little difficult to get on with. Look at them, all tense. It's like we don't get it. And so just like with confidence and trust and building it within yourself, how you got to be conscious of that so you can put a spotlight on it so you can be strategic, right? When you get a new horse that comes to your home, right, you've got to stop them getting stuck in this swirl of chronic stress, which can cause ramifications down the track. You got to manage it. And there's a number of things that you can do about that. Just be aware of it, number one, that this horse is going through a lot. And some horses are less affected by it than others. And there's a number of inherent traits to each individual horse. how much they've been exposed to the world before, their own inherent abilities to process sensory information, because they're all varying abilities for that. If all horses were the same and didn't vary in their ability to process their environments and stress, they wouldn't live in a herd. They'd be a lone animal. But they
Mm-hmm.
use each other, and they're knitted together by their differences. That's why they knit together, is weaknesses and strengths. So they're all different in how they handle it. Some can process it faster, quicker, and come to a conclusion and work out they're safe, and some can't. So you're all dealing with the horses going through that. So being conscious of that and manage it through that, to allow your horse that new home syndrome's, going to be a small transient thing of a few days, or going to be going on years and years and years until you have behavioral problems, and the horse has terrible laminitis or terrible gut issues, or
Mm-hmm.
then it's musculature and everything's gone to pot, all because of the chronic stress, the stress that initially got triggered on that move.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do like that I've learned to let horses have time, and
Yes,
it's just so
absolutely.
fruitful when I give them
Yep.
time. Yeah, and so it's pretty fun, and it's fun to watch them work as a herd and work it out.
Yeah.
Who fits where, and the friends they make, and I mean, you always knew that, but it's like being with more open eyes.
Yes, when you see it, it's just like, that's so necessary. And just also, this is the other thing, Barbara, that I'm very into, which people are just oblivious to, absolutely oblivious to, that horses link, you know, certain things to people, places, things. So just because, we all think, oh, the horse leads, we just lead it. And it's like, no, we all lead differently. We all put a halter on differently. We all
Mhm.
feel differently on their back. We all pick up the reins differently. We're all different. And some horses are more subjective about that differences than others, because what we got to understand is that we're communicating to them via when we're working with a halter on them or riding them, we're working on a touch form of language. And we all
Mhm.
touch, we all feel different, right? We all feel different.
Yeah.
So I say you've got to introduce your way and your signature, your touch signature to that horse, or your visual. We also use like a sign language with them as well, that they're learning to read and understand what we expect them to do. And we just
You're
take
right.
these
Yeah.
horses and we just assume they know. We don't even think that they're like, it's like taking on someone that's hearing impaired and just assuming they know what we our own form of like our own form of sign language. It's like, no, it's got to be, you've got to standardize it for them. You've got to introduce yourself, and this is the way we do things, and stop that horse being confronted and trying to work you out as it's trying to work out everything else as well. And so people don't know that. They get into a conflict with the horse. They then say, oh, this horse doesn't know anything. And it's like, mate, it just doesn't know you and your way. Take some time. You got to pretend it doesn't know anything. This is how I lead.
Yeah.
This is how we tie. This is how I pick up your feet. This is how I put your tack on. This is how I ask you to turn. This is how I ask you to go. And you're pretending they know nothing, and you're teaching it to them, and you're imprinting yourself on them. You've got to imprint
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, I understand that. With the young horses, they hadn't had their feet handled a lot because there's 3 young horses I got from Montana.
Yeah.
So the young horse, I was very proud of myself. I could walk up to that yearling and out in the pasture, no halter, no lead, and I could get her to pick up all 4 feet. And I was
Yeah.
very pleased, like, oh, look, she trusts me because she'll lift her feet up out here and da da da. And then
Yeah.
when it came time to have the farrier come, she was like, I can't lift up my feet. We're in the barn now. I
Yeah.
can't lift up my feet. And I said, gosh, I've been working with her every day, picking up her feet. And Tiffany was there helping me, the trainer. And she said, where were
Yeah.
you doing that? And I said, well, out in the pasture. Did you have a halter? No. She said, everything is different.
Yeah.
You
We
have a
changed the
halter on now.
context.
You're in the barn now. There's Molly here's going to trim her feet. Molly's a new person. Everything is
Yeah.
different. You can't
Mm-hmm.
expect her to understand A means B over here, that it's the same.
Yeah.
That's a human thing.
Yeah. That
And
we
then,
generalize our learning. Yep.
yeah, so you and Tiffany would get along great because you're
Yeah.
absolutely on the same page. Um, Same thing happens, but in a different way because dogs are different than
Yeah.
horses. Because I'll
Yes.
go work a dog on set, and a dog is highly trained by his owner, right? He's got
Mm.
all the tricks and he's trained. Lovely dog. Enjoys being on set because he's going to get cheese and it's going to be fun and and I'll start working with the dog because I know what the cameraman or the photographer wants. So
Yeah.
I'll work with the dog. and I will give off just my own body language. Like I don't change it for each dog's signal what he's learned. Okay, and the dogs, because they're wired differently, they are wired to want to work cooperatively in a group. They want to work with people. They want to please you. This is how we socialize them and how they're wired.
Yeah.
Dog figures out, oh, okay, I get it. You're asking me differently, but if I sit, I'm going to get a piece of cheese, and they learn it
Yeah,
like
bless.
so fast. And the owner goes like, well, I don't. He doesn't, this is how you teach him this and that. And I went like, no, he's so quick. He'll figure me
Mm,
out and we'll have a good relationship in a matter of moments. And he'll grasp what I'm asking him. So I adapt to the dog, each one, but also the dog at the same time is adapting to me.
yeah. That's
I'm
so
curious,
interesting.
are horses able, maybe they don't do it in the same way, but what you're saying is give the horse time to adapt to the way you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like give him the time to think instead of getting angry that he didn't read your language. It's like speaking to him in a foreign language almost.
Yeah.
And
And can you, I'm going to answer this, Barbara, but can you remind me that I want to ask you a question because
oh,
I really want to ask you a question. Do I think horses can adapt? Horses can adapt and they can be on the lookout to adapt if they've learned how to learn from you
mm,
and how to work you out, and they work out, see, in the first sessions with the horse, I'm also teaching them that I communicate with them and they can work me out. So after this is repeated a few times, they start working out that you're trying to tell, you're communicating with your, I can work you out, right? And you see them start hunting it, right? You can
yeah,
see them be aware, and it's like, this is different, don't know, but I can work this out. What do you want, human? What do you want? You can see that, but it's
yeah,
not like a real, you've got to, and normally what happens, that's because I'm aware of it. Most people are just assuming the horse knows. And of course,
yeah,
the horse just gives up on people. And you can see that the horses just, they dissociate from themselves until the back corner of the paddock into the distance, because they're having to shut out the human in front of them, because they're just a wall of, they're just a bundle of chaos that they're having to tolerate and try to work it out. But this is my question I got to you, Barbara, because I have a
okay,
belief that it's our relationship with dogs that can actually give us a false sense of competency with horses, right?
hmm,
And I'm going to tell you what I mean. It's just like a horse, I feel like you've got to really prove to that horse that that you can be navigated and you are no harm. That's what I feel like has to be upfront to most of horses, because most of horses will come with a bit of baggage. Maybe if you've had a horse, and I have had these horses as well, that you've had from day one that learned that you're okay and that's all right. But the vast majority of horses are a bit skeptical of human beings.
yeah,
Unlike dogs, they're a little bit more hardwired to maybe have an affinity for us. However, there's this other thing, Barbara, because I believe that dogs, and just tell me if I'm wrong. I want you, just don't agree with me, whatever. You just tell me how it is. But dogs, when they get a little bit worried, are more likely to fall into a bit of an appeasement behavior with a human. And we associate all that jumping and licking and kissing and all that. It's like, oh, they love us, they love us, they love us. So it
yeah,
makes us
yeah,
feel good. Whereas, and then, but with horses, of course, when you make them feel threatened, they do the complete opposite. They're like
right,
backtracking at you, or they're not flipping into that necessary, those appeasement behaviors that we don't know if they're still stress, but we interpret them with our human eyes as being love and affection and want and need and all those things we love. Yet the horse, when they get stressed, will normally flip into either flight or a bit of fight, or
right,
they'll
yeah.
shut down. And we feel the rejection and failure from that. But the dog is telling us, even though we're still stressing it, it's
Right,
having
yeah, you
this
don't
opposite
recognize
effect.
it.
Is there
Yep.
any, I have this, that's my theory, because I believe that dogs actually mess up our relationships with our horse, because dogs are such gifts from the gods, of so kind to
Yeah,
us.
no,
What are your
you are
thoughts on that?
absolutely, I'm not an expert on that at all, but I think the behaviors that I've talked to would absolutely agree, because those are the signs of stress that I'm looking for on set when the dog starts to pant, and
Mm,
that's a sign of anxiety. Okay,
yeah,
when his ears go back, it's a sign. He looks soft and friendly, whatever. It's a sign of stress and worry. You're exactly right about that. The dogs are ultimate people pleasers. How will I,
yeah,
what can I do and how can I please you? At least most
yes,
of the time. Unless you get into behaviors like fear biting and
yeah,
aggression, which comes, from um, lots of things. But with
yeah,
horses, you're right. Horses don't sit there and give you the goggly eyes and
no,
like bow down and like show submissive behaviors.
no,
Um, And they show affection in a much different way,
Mm.
if at
Yes.
all. I mean, they do. I do think they show affection, but it's more of a horsey way, and it's much more subtle.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I know which horses really like to do that, and the other ones who I respect, and they're just not so much into it, and that's okay. Like, don't run
Yeah.
up and hug strange horses. Don't hug them.
Yes. No. No.
Don't pet their nose. Those poor horses. How would you like it if I went and grabbed at your nose? That's like a privilege. So I teach the little ones that, like, just wait, put your hand out flat, let them
Yeah.
smell you, because all they want to do is pet that velvet nose, and we all get
Yes.
that. But that
Yeah.
has to be with permission from the horse,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that takes time. So I think you're absolutely right, and that we get frustrated that here my dog is whining because it's
Yeah.
supper. He knows the clock. Daylight saving has messed him up, and he's like, "Now I know you're a half
Oh,
hour late.
bless.
You're
Gorgeous.
fine. You're fine." But anyway, yes, exactly what you're saying, I think, is true.
Yeah.
Dogs are. See, because I train cats as well, and I don't train
Yeah.
cats because you can't train cats. You can encourage cats to do the behavior you want, and
Hmm.
the cat's going to do it, or he's not going to do it. And there's no way to be like, you can't force a. You probably could force a dog, but it wouldn't be kind. You certainly can't force a cat. So it's
Yeah.
all a shape. It's all a shaped agreement. You sit
Yeah.
here and you wear this silly costume because that's what they want you to do to sell a Halloween sweater. And I'll give you a piece of turkey, and we're having fun. And so I choose my cats really carefully, and I also make it like really. And I also go, cat's done, or the same thing, dog is done. Like I
Mm.
call it. I just
Yeah.
go, we're not going to push this animal over threshold. You talked about thresholds
Yeah.
in a different way
Yeah.
because these are stress thresholds. So, and the same thing with horses. Then we have to be respectful of who they are as
Yeah.
horses, but we expect them to be like dogs. That's kind of the point you were making.
That's right.
Um,
And that's
they're not
because
dogs.
I used to consider myself a real animal. I identify as a real animal lover and an animal person. Of course, my dogs love me. My cats
Yeah,
love me. I had all this
of course they
evidence.
love. Yeah.
Um, and then what's happening with my horse? And it just kind of added to the whole shame feeling of failure. Whereas now, with my eyes even about dogs, it's like I had this moment. Like I was reading a Patricia McConnell book on the other end of the leash, which is a great
Mhm.
book. I think every person that owns an animal should read that book.
Yeah.
And I'd come to the bit about that horses, that dogs, that we're primates, and our natural inclination is want to hug things, kiss things, grab it, hug it, and that dogs don't necessarily like that. And I remember reading that and going, that's interesting. But then I got up and my dog was next to me, and I did my automatic habit of hugging and kissing him. And for the first time, I saw him recoil. I saw him go
Mhm.
like, and I remember I stood back and I was like, oh my God, you don't like that. It was such a shock to see it.
Oh,
It was such a
yeah.
shock. So
And it
now I
wasn't
can
personal. Yeah.
no, and it was like, wow, you don't like that. And then I had to find, and then of course I read and I studied, and it's just like, what do they like? And I discovered that he loves me touching him, under here.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, he taught me that. But once you see it, you can't unsee it of
Oh,
what I
no,
was
it's
interpreting.
very true. It's an ongoing struggle. We run into this on set all the time. Okay, and I have to fight with the clients. Okay, we want the model to hug the dog. And I go, okay, I only have 2 or 3 dogs that actually sort of like that. And that's your
Yeah.
only choices. I'm not
Yeah.
going to bring in
Wow.
some dog that might behave, but he won't like it. I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that to the dog. It's not
Yeah.
fair to the dog. And so, your golden retriever tends to tolerate that. Some of them seem to really like it. Your Jack Russell Terrier, not so much. He's a
Yeah.
different mind. He's going to be doing something else. But I fight that. It's like they go, we want to show, they don't understand that
Yes.
this
Yeah.
isn't the thing that dogs necessarily like. And then the worst part that happens is they get someone who doesn't like dogs. And the dog goes,
Oh.
okay, you want me to hug him? And he's hugging me and he hates me. And, and I just, it's just like, why do you do this? So I'm trying to educate my clients, but I won't.
Yeah.
I make it a general rule. Like I like your shot, I like my job, but I like my animals more. And if you're asking
Yeah.
me to do something that stresses them out, you got it. We're not going to do it. And so
Yeah.
I'm really lucky that they listen. I mean,
Yeah. That's
they're
awesome.
getting it's so much better, but it's because I know better. 30
Yeah.
years ago, I might have been like, yeah, hug the dog. Just he's fine. Hug the dog. You know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
learned. So I
Yes.
carry
Absolutely.
guilt. I carry bad, like, oh, I wish I had known. But at least I grew and learned. At
That's
least I
right.
learned, and I want to get
Yep.
better. So, But
Yeah.
well, gosh, this has been so cool. We didn't even get to those questions I sent you, and I don't want to take any more of your time. But I feel like you answered a lot of them as we were
Yeah.
talking, so I feel good about that. So, please come to the United States. I will host you here in Wisconsin, so I can be
Yeah.
your
Awesome.
Midwest connection. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah,
Um,
that'd be great.
I think, oh my gosh, people would so benefit, especially your angle that you're talking about how women and how we change and how we feel and the guilt we carry. And I think there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of guys who are like, what? You know,
No,
so
they wouldn't have an no,
yeah,
go over their
yeah,
head
and
because
not
they
that
don't
they
get
have
it. I
to,
get
but
it.
it just made me feel a little bit better, like, oh wow, that's right, because I
Mm,
relate. And I'm sure
yeah.
and now I feel better, like, okay, so that's why I was a little anxious. Maybe my
Yep.
balance wasn't as good, things like that.
Yep. That's
So
right. Your
that was
balance, you,
that was
your
really cool.
hardwiring got tweaked by it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel really great now having this horse that I'm building my confidence back on. I
Yeah.
mean, I really feel
Perfect.
she was a gift from God. So, I cry happy tears when I ride her because I feel so much relief, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for that. But first, so how do we find you? You have a wonderful podcast called Canter Therapy,
Yeah. Canter
and you've
Therapy
got these
podcast.
two books, and you've got this blog. So what's like the clearinghouse? How do we find you so we can get
Yeah.
all immersed in Shelley Appleton?
Yes. So if you go to my website, which is www dot, of course, all one word, which is calm, willing, confident horses.com.au, because I'm in Australia, then
Mhm.
that has all my details about me, about my courses and resources, because I have courses and resources as well as my
Well,
books.
this is great because if we're not in Australia, at least we can benefit. We can still do all this
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. I
I
have a
love
lot of
that
trouble
about
with postage internationally. The postage has just changed recently and it costs twice as much as the book for the postage to send it. So I just make things electronic so people can like download it themselves and access it. So yes, I've got
that's
a lot
great.
of resources and I write a lot of blogs. I write about my journey. Actually, if you start at the start of my blogs and read up, you can kind of track my evolution in my understanding, which is quite fascinating.
Right, and
Yeah,
you're
so
on
I've got all
social
that.
media too,
Yeah,
because
on
I found
social
you
media. Yep.
on
So I
Facebook as
just,
well.
yeah, I'm on Facebook, which is Dr. Shelley Appleton, Calm, Willing, Confident Horses. That's my page. I then have a group called Calm, Willing, Confident Horses. I do have a membership group, which is where people interact with me. So I had my courses, which are, they're quite expensive because people work with me one on one with
Mhm. Yeah.
them. But I wanted to create something that was accessible to everybody. So I created this membership group that I still create lots of resources for and I engage with. I've created this most beautiful community of all these
Mm,
different disciplines of people that, I'm able to get people together where we don't fight about ideologies, even though people might subscribe to ideologies. We all respect that. So I like that I'm able to create that kind of environment.
yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, so that's my membership society. There's information on my website. And I'm
Okay.
also trying, because I've got this insight into human learning and a real interest in how people learn to work with horses. I've even got a course for that as well for professionals or people that are just interested in learning the fascinating way that people learn about horses. So I have other trainers come and learn from me. That's called my Equestrian Educators Program. So yeah, that's quite an interesting thing that I do as well. On Instagram as well at Calm, Willing, Confident Horses. I have a massive 180 people that follow me on Instagram. Instagram's only something recently that I've gone, okay, I've got to try to work this out.
Right, right. Yeah,
I like
no.
writing. You see, I like long writing essays and stuff like that, but the world is not kind of getting that. So it's like, okay, I'll adapt. I'll create some content for generation X, and we read. That's all good. We read stuff. We're happy with that. But I know other generations slightly different, so I have to adapt. So that's what I'm doing on Instagram.
Well, that's great. No, that's how I found you, like I said, on Facebook, which is my generation.
Yeah, yeah, mine too. No,
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this chat and learning about your expertise as well. That was brilliant. I've always wanted to talk to someone about my theory on dogs.
No, you're exactly right. It's very true. Dogs are people pleasers. That's how they survived
Yeah,
all these years. That they were one of the first things to be domesticated, right? So how did they do that? By hanging around the fires and
yeah,
going for the food, and then getting closer to the people, and then not biting them or causing harm. And then they started to realize how good they are. And then, of course, look what we've done with our breeds of dogs
yeah.
over
That's
time. We've made
incredible.
them more and more in like babies.
Yes.
Like we've pushed in their faces and we've made their eyes bigger and all kinds of compared
Yeah.
to original dogs, um, because that's a trait we like,
Yes.
and because I don't have like a little dog you carry around like a little purse dog, and
Yeah.
I mean, okay, each his own, but I mean that's you know, I have a hard. Okay, I'm going to go there. People get mad at me, but they are ultimate people pleasers. Those little dogs, and God bless
Yeah.
them. But I've got border collies, so what do I know?
Nah, awesome.
Farm,
No, I've
we live
really
on a
enjoyed the
farm.
chat.
Thank you so much for taking the time today, and I encourage everyone to go and look for Shelley's information. One more
Thank
time,
you.
your website, calm and clear for us. One more
Yes,
time.
it's www. All one word. This is all one word. Calm, willing, confident horses.com.au. But if you do type in Dr. Shelley Appleton into Google, it'll come up as a Google search too.
There you go. And we'll also have all the information
Yeah,
in our
thank you.
show notes and things like
Yeah,
that.
very grateful.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you, Barbara. See you later.